Not again. So this is our Stoked on Civics presentation. Thank you so much for coming. We're moving from participation to power. So we're going to shift it and actually, here, go to the next slide. Thank you. So this is what we're going to cover today. I'm actually moving this one to the top. So we're going to start with Senator Chris Lee, who's going to give us a behind the scenes look at the legislature. Then we're going to go back to me and we're going to go over strategic civic engagement and the Surfrider Foundation. Then we're going to pass it off to Colin Lee to take us through the lovely process of the Hawaii State Legislature in a crash course. And then we're going to go over our priority bills for this session. We'll have Q&A at the end and also a little bit in the middle. So without further ado, I would love to introduce Senator Chris Lee. So he represents, we have a little bit more of a lead in. One second. So Senator Lee represents the Kailua, Waimanalo, and Hawaii Kai district in the Hawaii State Senate. So he is the chair of the Senate Water, Land, Culture, and Arts Committee. This is a really, really important committee. And he's been an ally of ours for many years. Really honored to have him. And especially this year, we've had the distinct privilege of supporting him move some really meaningful measures that protect our beaches. So this comes at a time where we really need it. We have our government's kind of in a reactive state when it comes to dealing with a lot of these issues that are facing our beaches. And Senator Lee is really moving the conversation towards forward-looking and proactive solutions. So really grateful. I just want to also call attention to this amazing quote that he gave in an HPR interview, I think it was a couple weeks ago. The question then becomes, if our beaches are the center of our communities, our way of life, and certainly our economy, what are we going to do to protect them? Amazing. So thank you so much, Senator Lee.
Thanks so much, everybody. Good to see so many familiar faces and new faces. Thanks so much for having me here to talk about some of these issues. I have to acknowledge right up front, I have to run in a little bit, so I can't stay the whole time. PBS is doing a show that I committed to some time ago, so I have to go over there to shoot that. But as has been mentioned, there's a lot of issues up right now in our legislature. Certainly, there's a lot of issues in our communities, not only here in Oahu, but on the neighbor islands. And at the center of a lot of those are these issues of our shorelines, right? Not only our beaches specifically, but what does it mean for each community, because they're all different, to be able to actively manage and protect those for future generations. And what does that look like? What are the considerations, and ultimately, what has happened up till this point? And it's fair to say, I think, and I don't want to claim a role as a scientist or anything like that, but the data says that we have a lot of impacts on our shorelines that are changing things more rapidly now than ever before. At least not which, of course, sea level rise, erosion, changing reefs, where we've lost about half our reefs over the last 40, 50 years. We're expected to lose most of the other half in the next 30 to 40 years. And that changes rates of erosion and water flow and all kinds of things. And all of these, while technical kind of in nature, in terms of processes, ultimately change the way that we as people and we as communities use these resources. And I'm from Kailua, born and raised, and the beach there has been such a huge part of my formative life. As my parents remind me, I used to sit down on the sand and eat it, when I was yay big. And then, of course, in the water, learning to surf and body surf and dive and sail and all the things. And of course, it's fair to say that for our economy, these things are obviously front and center for the reasons why people come to Hawaii in the first place, why so many of our jobs and visitor-related industry are at our beaches, at our nearshore marine environments, doing tours and all kinds of other stuff. But for me, mostly it's the community piece. How do we ensure that whether you're Kailua or any other place around the state, you can continue to be able to use these resources, public resources, which are protected by our Constitution for public access and perpetuity, as the kinds of resources that we use here and have grown up with. And that's going to be changing. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. There's no amount of money we have to be able to keep everything the way it is forever. We've got those coming impacts from climate change and other things that are just far larger than the amount of resources we have. So the question is, how do we triage what resources we do have and take actions today that will try and mitigate a lot of the pain that we're going to feel inevitably down the road tomorrow. So in that, there've been a number of bills over the years that have started to change the way that we think about these things. In the past, as we all know, I mean, most of this shoreline along the South Shore is pretty well armored and kind of rocky and or concrete. Waikiki is an interesting analog because it kind of, in a way, I don't think of Waikiki as sort of like your typical Hawaiʻi community, but it does have elements of all the things that we're talking about here today. We've got certainly a beach there now, which is not natural for just about all of it. It's been restored and modified over the last century in many, many different ways. It's also got a lot of economic drivers. One recent study, like in the last 15 years, found that if you lose Waikiki Beach, you're losing about, I think it was $2.1 billion or give or take to the economy here. And more than that, as you go down to the far end, where I think most of us locals tend to hang out at Kaimanas and beyond, if you lose that, then you lose that public access. And so we are experiencing erosion that continues to accelerate for a whole lot of reasons in areas like that. The question is, what do you do? And part of the lessons learned, I think, over the last century in places where we've done things the wrong way, or we've prioritized solutions for one specific property, let's say, not realizing at the time that that just accelerated erosion down the rest of the beach and wiped out everything else, are lessons to learn from as we think about what to do next. And over the last decade or so, we've had incidences like in the North Shore and other places where houses have started to become encroached upon and then eventually lost along with other seawalls and various type of beaches. And so as we've seen this decade drag on, we've seen a number of different conflicts come into play. You've had shoreline property owners who say, you know what, whoa, I want to protect my house above all else, build a seawall or something like that, which can be great for that one property. But again, what do you do about your neighbors? And then you've seen in other places retreat where folks have sold their properties and you've seen structures be moved back, and you've seen the beach kind of extend its ability to retreat and accrete. And these cycles are cycles. The challenge is when you have a series of good years or decades even where you have accretion on a beach and it grows, everybody uses it. The way our current law sits, that property, depending where the foliage line and the high wash of the waves is, can become private property. In that case, that means you can then build upon it. And then what happens when the cycle changes and then there's a loss of beach? Then you get into these potential conflicts. So these things have been playing out for some time. How many folks are here from Richardson? Because I know there are a few. Woo! Hey. I asked this because I know there's been like a lot of work done there looking at these kinds of things and really what do you do as solutions, not just in the technical side of like what does that look like, but also legally, who's responsible, who pays, who has the liability, ultimately, how does this all fit together? And so there have been a number of bills this year, and I'll say there's been kind of a lull, right? I mean, the policy of the state the last, I don't know, somebody correct me here, who's stronger in this field than I am, for the last maybe 5 or 6 years has been we're essentially not going to allow any sort of broad scale mitigation. We're going to do some temporary stuff time to time, but ultimately we don't want to continue armoring specific properties and allowing that kind of loss of beach to continue, especially in places like the North Shore where you lose Sunset Beach, for example. And I mean, that is not just a loss of a beach for that community. That is a loss for the state. That is a loss for the global community in a place that has been the epicenter of so much of our way of life here, and that has influenced surfing and everything else abroad. So what do? So this year, there have been a number of bills that have not really had traction before, and some of them are driven by specific incidences. There are beaches on some of the neighbor islands that are experiencing erosion and retreat issues, where there's condos and properties and things like that, just like the North Shore, are very similar to it, that are looking for solutions. There's, in particular on Maui, one particular case where you have a cemetery and a kind of community center that's been there for generations that's being eroded away, and so much so that parts of the cemetery are like falling into the ocean, and you have headstones and bodies, things that have been exposed. And some of the solutions in those places look different than what they might look like for Waikiki, where there's also discussion going on about how do we handle the shoreline over the long term. There's a project right now that's kind of underway that would build out rock growings and things like that, where sand can be artificially restored and maintained, and which could have public benefit, because if it actually adds to beach where there wasn't beach before and adds public access along the shoreline, that's been a goal for that area for, I think, since before I've been alive. That's never actually been realized. So all these things are in the mix discussion. And what we've seen so far are certainly property owners themselves say, hey, our project, our beach, we want to deal with this situation. What we haven't seen is a kind of broader process, the legal process play out that defines responsibility for who is responsible for what and what it's going to mean for property owners, because we know that the folks who are kind of in the conversation today, whose properties are being jeopardized, are certainly just the tip of the iceberg as erosion and sea level rise and other things continue all around the state. So I really want to point out our folks from the state here. Like King, are you guys speaking coming up?
Michael's speaking.
Oh, great. Okay. Let me just kick all the hard questions to him. But and just say that, on the state side at DLNR, there's a number of different agencies that kind of overlap, and offices that have responsibility in this area. But more than anything, what they've been pointing out is that the solutions, whatever they look like that are being considered, have to consider not just the property owners themselves and their interest in protecting their property, but have to consider the protection of the entire beach itself. And the priority can't just be, we're going to protect these properties at the expense of the public community and everybody else who enjoys, that as a center of community. And so some of the amendments to some of the bills that have been moving have reflected that, where the discussion, as we look at different areas, not just single properties, but stretches of beach and literally littoral cells and things like that, engage not just the people who are on that shoreline, but rather the community who that beach ultimately belongs to and is a part of. And so this is the discussion and the important place where folks like you guys can get involved, because you all live within a few miles of the ocean, I'm sure. And you all have some connection to the water and the beach, or you wouldn't be here right now. And so having your voices heard about what that process looks like and how to engage folks like yourselves who may not live immediately adjacent to the beach, but certainly value it as part of your daily routine or some recreation or whatever it might be and mean to you, is just as valid as the folks who live right on the beach. And so that's part of the discussion the legislature's tackling right now, as we figure out what these bills might end up looking like as they move along and if they pass. Let me stop there for a minute and back up and just say, I was elected in 2008. It's been a hot minute since I've been around. Never planned to run for office, but nevertheless, here I am. But over that time, I've learned that this kind of engagement is like super important. And to think that the policies that are being made actually are made in a vacuum is totally false. I've seen literally individuals come in and change the course of an entire issue. And I know some of the folks in this room, like Stuart Coleman, Ted, so many others, have participated in that process. And we have laws on the books today. We have policies in place because of some of the work that they've done at the legislature, and more importantly, engaging the community. And so as we think about our roles, we each have one. It is not just our elected officials who decide these things. We cannot do it in a vacuum. I've almost never seen one legislator try and do something and it just happens to get done. It is truly a village because it requires people showing up and weighing in and making that case for why that thing needs to happen to convince other legislators or other policymakers at different levels to do something. And the value that you bring to the table from your different walks of life, whether you're in this situation, a user of the water or the beaches, or live in the community and rely on all these things as some part of your routine, is valued input just as much as anybody else here or anywhere else. And so your ability to weigh in is going to be heard and listened to. And that's why, for example, certain bills have passed or died on this or any other issue. So let me stop there just for a minute, open up for questions and not just drone on at you guys, because I didn't come with a script or anything, so I don't know where I'm supposed to go from here.
I think we can all go home now. That was it.
Yeah, well, which time do we have?
I mean, does anyone have any questions? Yeah, Michael.
Thank you. So let's say a citizen comes in front of your committee and wants to either fight for a bill or kill it. What have you seen work? Like what is happening?
Yeah, so what works and what doesn't in terms of getting legislation passed? You know, it's rare that in this discussion people have their minds changed suddenly about something because of one person's story. And so I can't go to colleagues and readily convince them to change their mind. It's hearing from everybody else that really helps drive that. And so getting your voice in front of the right people is important. In the in the political process, right? Personal stories are so valuable. Because we get, like, I'll be frank, like there's like a zillion special interests and lobbyists and different community stakeholders and advocates, you know, across the spectrum, who all are down at the Capitol on a regular basis. I don't know how many meetings I typically get in a year request for, but it's in the hundreds, maybe even like thousands in a really busy year. But you've got to be able to sort who's who, who's credible, who's kind of full of it, and figure out, all right, based on all that, what do we do? And what really is helpful is not just saying, you know, I support this, but rather I support this because here's how, in my own personal way, this thing that you're considering impacts me on a daily basis. Or here's the story of someone who's been impacted that I know in the area. Make those things personal and real, and use that to reach out to policymakers, not just that you know are working on an issue, but those that represent you too in your area, especially those that represent you in your area, because theoretically they should be listening to you because you're going to vote for them or not, or convince others to. So what really works, I found, is first of all, multiplying your voice. And that means going in not just by yourself, but wrangling together a couple like-minded friends, neighbors, family, coworkers, whatever, and going in together. And when you have multiple people from the same community reach out, that's like, whoa, okay, I gotta like put on a show, like very interested in what you have to say. You know, let me listen hard. That kind of thing is regular because it's just, you know, human psychology. People are people, including legislators and elected officials, and we're gonna listen to louder voices and those who have more voices. That doesn't mean your voice doesn't matter. Certainly reach out. Sending an email is the least you can do to say, like, hey, this is who I am, here's what I care about, I'm engaged. Getting on the phone and talking to somebody is sort of the next step up. And then when there's, and I'm sure you guys are going to cover the process itself, when there's bills up for hearing and testimony to be had, there are two ways to really engage there. Yeah, sure, you can all do the stuff that we talked about, sending an email or something, or checking the box on a form saying I support or oppose. Great. But actually showing up in person to say something and share that story that I talked about that is personal to you. And there's two ways to do that. Over Zoom, all hearings are hybrid right now, so no excuses, anybody. You can take literally a couple of minutes to do that. But the more important thing is showing up in person. That's like the most high impact, valuable thing. When someone actually takes the time to come down to the Capitol, and that can be a real pain in the ass, I know. But get down there and testify in person, say a few words. It just is much more meaningful, I think. And I'm speaking not just for myself, but certainly some of the comments I've heard from colleagues over the years, because there's someone right there. They're a real person. It's not just some talking head in a box, and it's certainly not just some random email you got. And so that is valuable. But the real value in it is that you can get questions asked of you, and you can explain something. And so if there's an issue related to, like, I don't know, Eddie Aikau, for example, and Stuart Coleman shows up and says, hey, Eddie was a great guy because of X, Y, and Z, and I've never heard of him before, suddenly I have questions, I can turn to Stuart and start a whole conversation and dialogue on the spot in the hearing. And when there are people who are about to vote on it and trying to decide whether or not they want to vote for something, that can make the difference. But more than that, it lets you help build a relationship, because while you're down there, or even over the phone, you can talk to other elected officials outside of the context of a hearing, outside of that immediate moment where a bill's being heard, and start to just say, hey, I want to just chat for 5 minutes about this issue. It's important to me. Here's what it is. Do you have any questions? I mean, that is relationship building. And ultimately, at a place like this in Hawaii, certainly, and around the world, or around the rest of the country, I mean, those kinds of relationships at the sub-national level make a difference, because it's real people and real faces associated with an issue. And even if things go south and your bill or your issue or whatever it is doesn't make it, you've got that relationship where you can call that person up the next time and say, hey, I actually want you to consider this for the future. I want to be a resource. And the next time this comes around, hopefully you'll be able to just walk into their office because you already have a relationship built and say, hey, by the way, can you just support this thing? And it's those relationships and those connections built over time, not just with you, but again, with your neighbors and relatives and friends, that's so important. Because win or lose, and I lose like 9 times out of 10 on the things that I work on, anything worthwhile takes time, and usually a lot of failure along the way, as we all know. And so your typical bill will take multiple, maybe 2 or 3 years to pass, sometimes longer. Sometimes, like plastic bans, like a decade. But inevitably, if you follow these kinds of basic strategies and engage and build relationships over time, you become trusted in a way. And on top of that, if each time you fail, you're still engaging other people around you and bringing them to the table, you're building an army that inevitably means you will succeed, because you will have that sheer volume of numbers and the relationships to walk into any office and say, hey, this is a good idea, let's do it. That is what I've seen over the years change and win issues over and over again. So to answer your question, it is that that commitment and really that dedication. Right? I mean, democracy is eternal vigilance. There is no like, yeah, I'm showing up here for this one day and the world's going to be great just like that. It is truly year after year. And sometimes it's going on the defensive, saying why things are bad and they shouldn't be changed. Just the same.
Senator, just wanted to give you a time check, so I know you have a commitment. It's 5:51.
Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, hi, Senator. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate everything you just shared. And I have a bit of a curiosity, or I guess a pushback. I think especially those of us that have been around the legislature for a while have seen issues where community is really behind something, either happening or really close to it happening. And the thing goes against community's wishes, despite people being strongly organized and making their voices loud. Like pesticides can be a contemporary one, where the interests of large corporations are listened to over community voices, no matter how well organized they seem to be. What's going on there, and how can we fix it as part of a process where we're engaging, but even when we're going up, our voices don't seem.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. I think more people feel disenfranchised and just like screw this than ever before, including myself some days. And when I got into this, I don't think I had any illusions that changing the world was going to be easy. Like I said, I never imagined I'd run for anything like this, and I'd never been involved before, like in student government or anything like that growing up. I actually started with an internship at the Capitol working the front desk, just answering phones for another state representative. And the one thing that inspired me, which was the senator question, was this belief on my part that, okay, yeah, this is a fun experience, but the powers that be are the powers that be, and what will happen at the end of the day is they'll triumph over someone like me or anybody walking in off the street wanting to do exactly what you're talking about. And what changed my mind about that was a guy who was here last year who walked in off the street and said, "Hey, I want to talk to," at the time I was working for the chair of the Judiciary Committee. I want to talk to her about this issue down in Kaka'ako where they're building a whole bunch of towers and it's going to block our access to the beach and or not the beach, but the shoreline there. I was like, "Okay, thanks. Let me take your number. I'll pass it on." Came back a few weeks later, same thing. Came back after that, brought some friends, brought some neighbors. And over the summer, in the course of those months, started bringing more and more people down to the point that there were marches of like thousands of people from Kaka'ako down to the state capitol protesting against this development. And ultimately, it was on the news like daily. It was on the front page of the paper. And the legislature that year changed the law to block that development and ensure access to the shoreline there in perpetuity. That started with just really a couple senior citizens who cared. And that made me realize, like, holy cow, if they can do that, like, surely my friends and I can do something too. Like, we're capable, which got me eventually to running for office and all that stuff. But, it took that moment for me to realize that change is possible and individuals can make a difference. And certainly the collective work of people together can make that difference even faster. On pesticides, that's another great example. When I was first elected, that was an issue just as it is today. We had tons and tons of people complaining on the neighbor islands that pesticides were drifting into their, like, sprayed in the air, aerial spraying, drifting into their schools and homes and everything. And for 7 years, a number of us fought that issue and lost time and time again. And over that time, though, the community organized and people kept coming back year after year. One guy in particular, I remember, his name's Clayton from Kauai. Every year, despite losing, despite feeling completely angry and upset at the world and would scream it at hearings sometimes, kept coming back. And you had the county start to organize and take action. And eventually that enabled us who were working on the issue at the state capitol to change the law to make Hawaii the first state to ban chlorpyrifos, which was the most potent of the chemicals they were spraying, required basic disclosure and other things, which are still not fully in the place they should be today. But it was a massive victory relative to what was happening throughout the rest of the country and set a precedent that has now gone from state to state all around. At the same time, we were fighting the utilities, again, like massive multi-billion-dollar behemoths where individual people's voices were like drowned out by the same old. And though we lost the first number of years, we eventually passed a law that forced the utilities to move to clean energy. We're the first state to move to 100% clean energy and mandate that over the objections and outright opposition of most of the industry here in Hawaii and most of the lobbying capacity and all of those kind of special interests. And here we are today, now 10, 11 years later. Hawaii was the first state, and now more than half the states in the country have adopted something similar based on the work that was started here, based on the work that was actually started by a handful of people in the community who said, yes, we can, and then organized and got an organization, Blue Planet Foundation, involved, got schools involved, and got people to actually show up. These things are possible, is my point. You can win on issues that seem impossible, absolutely impossible at the outset. And frankly, it just takes that organizing and that perseverance to fail and come back stronger and engage more people time after time. Anything that's worth doing, right, is going to be hard. This is no exception. And what excites me and keeps me going at the end of the day, having lost a ton of these, far more than at least I feel like I've won, is that there is this group of people out there who continue to engage despite losing on these issues. and will continue to come back. And especially with our next generation coming up in schools and places like Richardson and others, being way more engaged than my friends and I ever were the same age, gives me hope that that means inevitably change is going to be faster than it was the last few decades. And that's something that means for me a lot, because it means I'm not going to be here forever, and that's okay. And from my worldview and the small place I occupy in the universe here, like, if I go away, it's fine. There are so many more capable people than me that are continuing to carry on and will do way more than I was ever able to do. So I would say don't assume that failure is failure. Assume it's a learning opportunity, and you're going to be able to actually overcome eventually. Because for every victory we've ever had in the state on any issue you can imagine, that's how they happened. And they only happened because people like you said, "Okay, we should go." So with that, I better get going myself, but want to say thank you guys for engaging. Truly, it takes all of you guys and so many more coming in on these issues. Our next speaker sounds like, over here, will tell you a lot more about the ins and outs of the political process and everything. And then our following speaker from DLNR. Okay. Colin is an expert at shoreline issues and what to do about them. And then our next speaker after that, finally, Mike came from DLNR, is sort of one of the brains and working on our coastal issues. So grill him for sure, and do ask about how these conversations we're having translate into the policies that they're working on, because that's the question I have too. So thank you everybody for your time. Thanks for getting involved. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
All right. You want to go to the next slide? Thank you so much, Senator Lee. That was like the perfect lead-in to direct action organizing. Couldn't have planned it better. So, like I said, the Surfrider Foundation, our mission is we're a grassroots national nonprofit dedicated to the protection and enjoyment of our ocean waves and beaches for all people. Next slide. How do we do this? So we are a volunteer-led network. We have over 80 chapters, over 130 student clubs nationwide. We have 3 here in Hawaii. And each of these clubs and chapters is entirely volunteer-led. So we have our executive committee for the Oʻahu chapter here. If you can raise your hand. These guys are super stoked on civics, right? Yes. Okay, I'm seeing some nodding from Arlene. All right, next slide, please. So how do we accomplish this mission of protecting our ocean waves and beaches? We have 5 initiatives that kind of guide us. So we have plastic pollution, ocean protection, beach access, coastal preservation, and clean water. Okay, so what is civics? Civics is defined as individual and collective actions designed to identify and address issues of public concern. This is a very big umbrella. So without getting into semantics so much, I really want to focus on how civic engagement translates to addressing power structures and decision-making processes. This is where direct action organizing comes in. So direct action organizing is winning concrete improvements in people's lives, making people aware of their own power, and altering structural relations to power. Essentially, it's a strategy for turning participation into durable power and enacting systemic change. So that doesn't have as good a ring as like Stoked on Civics. Stoked on Direct Action Organizing is too much of a mouthful, but we're going to stay with the Stoked on Civics title. So civics really becomes direct action organizing when action becomes strategic, collective, and aimed at shifting power, right? That was what Senator was talking about, is bringing your neighbors, bringing your friends, really building up that army. So we're not just participating in the system, right? Next, please. So Surfrider is pretty much embedded in direct action organizing in the entirety of what we do. So, you know, what we're really trying to do is build that consistency and reliability, expand our capacity, get those wins, That leads to credibility, and that's how we're really effective in our mission. We're tackling some really complex systemic issues. So because of that, we have to have really holistic strategies, both bottom up and top down. So our recipe for success is really in that community building. It's in our programs and it's in our campaigns. So starting over with our programs, this is kind of the bottom up. This is where we're base building. And also all of this again, so direct action organizing is essentially base building, leading to developing leadership, and then strategic advocacy, and then really building the movement. So over here with our programs, again, this is kind of base building. This is our community science and stewardship. This is stuff like our beach cleanups, our water task force. That's our citizen science water quality monitoring program. Our ocean-friendly garden program. This is using sustainable landscaping principles to reduce stormwater runoff, improve coastal resilience. Our ocean-friendly restaurants and hotels, which is really celebrating those businesses that are making sustainable choices for our environment. And our climate action program, which is using nature-based solutions to really fight climate change impacts and improve coastal resilience. Right. So this is where we're really building trust and capacity and building that base with the community. All of this, again, kind of the whole spectrum. We're building capacity. I'm going to say a lot of words, a lot. So this is our leadership development is really the engine of organizing, right? That's developing the next generation of organizers to keep the mission going and growing. Also, just to point out, partnerships and coalitions and working groups are essential to this equation. Again, we're talking about these big systemic issues. Not one organization is going to figure it all out. So we have a lot of our partners here, which is incredible. We have Wastewater Alternatives Innovation. We have DLNR, really incredible partner. We have Carissa, she's with Future Cell, Climate, oh my gosh, why am I? Care for Aina now, sorry. So again, it's like we need to work with all the people that are in this space and really amplify our voices. This is where we get to our campaigns. So campaigns are where we're trying to influence a decision maker to make a decision in favor of our ocean, waves, and beaches. When that happens, it's called a victory. This oftentimes looks like policy. Again, so we're here to talk about the legislative process, engaging in legislation or litigation, taking it to the courts. So this is really the tip of our advocacy spear. We do this at a local, state, and federal level. This is where we really get into that strategy. And again, if we're tackling these big systemic issues, we need to build that long-term capacity that outlasts any one campaign, really building that movement. Just to show a snapshot of some of the victories across Surfrider Foundation Network, we're at 88. It's actually, I think, 91, but I haven't updated the website. Next. Okay, so this is my last slide. This is really going through the strategy that we use when we're engaging in a campaign. So this is when we're taking it from participation to power. So I just want to call out, a lot of people think that if they're right, if they have the science behind them, that they're going to win, right? A lot of people think that if they're outraged, that if they're loud, that they're going to win. That's not a strategy. That's not really building power, right? So power shifts when it's organized and strategically applied at the right decision point. So pathways, not pitchforks, really means that we're mapping the pathway to change. We're not necessarily arguing or yelling at the people that we want to make a decision in our favor. So the first thing that we need to do is really set a goal. If we don't know where we're going, we're not going to get there. Yogi Bear. So first, we need to know what issue we're addressing. So for instance, if we're addressing coastal erosion and houses collapsing on the beach, that's our issue. What do we want? What's the long-term thing we want? Healthy and protected beaches statewide. Sounds great. Short term, so let's pass a beach protection bill, right? So that's our short-term goal. And in this instance, let's say that we want to pass it through a committee. So we're going to map the power. That's our next step. So in this committee, who has the decision-making authority? We want to first look to the chair. The chair holds a lot of power within the committee, right? And generally, when you're mapping power, you want to try and whittle it down to one decision maker. We want to have just one target generally. So then we want to look at that decision maker and say who and what influences them. So are they in election year, for instance? If they're in election year, they might be more sensitive to constituent voices from their district. Who influences them? This might be other politicians, party majority leaders. This might be donors. This might be corporations. This might be their constituents, right? So then we want to start looking at where is our power in relation to them, which takes us to the next point is organizational considerations. What resources do we actually have to apply to this issue? How can we pass it through this committee? How much time do we have? How many people do we have? How many leaders can we dedicate towards passing this bill? Where are the gaps? So let's say there's a big difference if the hearing's tomorrow versus if it's next week. And then that takes us into constituency and people power. So again, when we were mapping out who influences these folks, we really want to look to who is impacted by this measure, right? So for instance, one of the bills that Colin, actually Michael is going to talk about later, is our real estate transaction bill moving shoreline disclosures to the advertising phase. So for this example, who is impacted? Real estate agents, coastal homeowners, people who use the beach. Right, so we want to look at that group of people who are impacted and figure out who are allies and opponents. So they have really important voices in passing this measure. So allies, right? We want to build up our coalition. So for instance, the Ocean Legislative Hui, we work with them. They're supporting some of these bills, including this one. Also, like we're very lucky that DLNR supports this particular bill. Very important ally to have. And then opponents are really critical, right? So this is, in this instance, is the Hawaii Association of Realtors. So we want to look at the concerns that they're bringing up so that we can address them and that we can try and make this bill more politically safe for the decision maker. So this goes into tactics, right? So one tactic that we actually did for this is direct engagement. So meeting with the chairs, talking about the bill, talking about the arguments that the opponents are bringing up in this case, and then working to really dispel that, to diffuse those arguments, giving them the information that they need to have the backing to make the decision that we want. And then, you know, do we want to activate the network? And this kind of goes to escalating strategically. We don't want to well, all of our resources and call to action every single committee hearing for every single bill. No one's going to listen to us, right? So we don't want to have fatigue with our network. And also, you know, it changes in each scenario. So every single committee hearing, we might have an entirely different strategy. So that's kind of how we go from participation to power. I think the next slide. Okay, so now I'm going to pass it off to Colin Lee. So he is a longtime Surfrider. He used to be the policy coordinator. He's like SOS policy manager, and he has been my legislative guru for a couple of years now. So he's going to walk us through what happens at the legislature.
Thank you. And thank you, Hannah, Kaylin, Jessica, for putting all this together. It's a lot of work. And I'm a little nervous, so bear with me. Yes, I'm a little nervous, so bear with me. So I also wanted to circle back to what some of this stuff that Chris said. He didn't mention this, but he was the pioneer for the 100% RPS portfolio standard by 2045. He also was the pioneer for marriage equality, for carbon neutrality. He's been a huge advocate. He's the chair of the National Conference of Environmental Legislators, which is like state lawmakers who work on environmental policy. So he's been an advocate for a long time. I had the honor of working for him for 2 sessions, answering his phone, and I learned a lot. And I've been able to carry that through into law school and volunteering for Surfrider Foundation when Stuart was the chair several years ago, and have continued to do that. And I'm really grateful to be here. Going to talk to you guys. This is going to be the most boring talk that's going to be great.
Make it loud.
To rip through it so we can get to the more interesting thoughts. So as we know, the Hawaii State Legislature is modeled after the United States State Legislature, which is modeled after the English Parliament. So it's a bicameral legislature with 2 houses. You know, in England, that's the House of Lords and the House of Commons. In the US and in all the states, it's the Senate and the House of Representatives. So bicameral just means 2 houses, 2 chambers, both intended to originally represent different interests. In the Senate, you have less people and they have wider districts, and whereas in the House, you have more people, more representatives who are intended to be closer to the people. The Hawaii State Legislature operates on a biennium, which means it's a 2-year cycle from January to early May. That has some important implications when you are in the second year of the biennium, and it also has some important implications when you are considering your policy strategy. The other important implications are also related to the budget and the 2-year budget cycle of this state. The other really important aspect of our state legislature is that it's a part-time legislature from January to May. This was one of the original models in a lot of states because it was intended for the state lawmakers to have jobs outside of being lawmakers so that they could be, amongst normal people, have normal jobs, really understand the issues. And also, it wasn't really conceived that state legislatures would have so much to consider at the time. Every year, you'll see bills introduced that this situation has evolved, and every year you'll see bills introduced that try to change our state legislature to an annual or a full-time job, like as in January to December every year. There's probably merit to that, but we'll see. Most of these state lawmakers are working throughout the year regardless, but it does make for a quick legislative session. And as everybody here knows, who's had to deal with the 48 hours notice, everything happens quickly, and you really got to make sure that you've done the work and ensure that your bills get hearings. Excellent. So this is just the quick 0 to 6 of what it takes to identify an issue. Here at the Surfrider Foundation, we focus on coastal marine policy for one. That's been my specialty through my work in education and energy stuff too. You identify an issue, you try to identify some solutions to it, and if those are statutory or legal solutions, you can try and draft a bill, or you can work with a state lawmaker who can conceive an idea, draft the bill. Then you get that bill introduced. The bill goes to subject matter committees, which are supposed to go through the substance of whatever the bill is and what it implicates, and analyze the bill really in depth. And this is the opportunity where folks have the opportunity to give public participation, give testimony, etc. There are committee hearings. Those are the subject matter committees. And Article 3 of the state constitution says that every bill must have only one topic. It must be relating to the title, and it must have the words in the final act to be enacted by the state legislature. Article, next slide, please. Article 3, section 15 says that every bill, the only requirements for a bill to pass through the state legislature is that it must be read on the floor of each chamber 3 times, and those cannot be on the same days. So the committee structure is actually something that we've adopted just in practice because it makes a lot of sense. But what is actually important is that a bill gets 3 readings on the floor, and if it's the second year of the biennium and a bill was introduced in the first year and it's in its non-originating chamber, then it must have a 7th reading, at least 1 additional reading on the floor of the non-originating chamber. So there's a lot of back and forth. There's all of these deadlines. So in order for a bill to make it through all of its committees, sometimes a bill can be referred to as many as 6 total committees or more in what's called joint referrals. But you traditionally have 2 to 3 committees that a bill will be heard by, and the committees that we primarily deal with at the Surfrider Foundation are the water and land committees of the House and Senate, the Agriculture, and Environment Committee in the Senate, the Energy and Environmental Protection Committee in the House, and knowing the structure of these committees, and then the Finance Committee or the Ways and Means Committee in the Senate and House, or the Judiciary Committee in both chambers. So it's a big roundabout, and this constitutional structure leads to ultimately the executive branch of the government needs to authoritatively sign off on the law or not. So that means the governor in this case, but just like the president has to sign off on federally, congressionally passed bills, the governor in the state has to sign off on a bill, unless if a bill is passed 10 days before the end of session, not including the weekends, the governor then has 10 days to sign off on a bill, or it automatically sign off or veto the bill, or it becomes law. That's Article 3, Section 16. And if it's passed within 10 days of the end of the session or at the end of the session, then the governor has 45 days or the bill automatically becomes law. The governor can always veto any piece of legislation. Also stop me at any time if you have questions. What can you do? Most important thing you can really do is what Senator Lee was talking about earlier, which is build relationships with senators or with lawmakers. It doesn't have to be your district lawmaker, but those are usually really important because they know that you're gonna get their name on your ballot. And you'll also be able to convince your friends who probably live around you to vote or not vote for them. And so they're usually really good people to start with. But if you're working, say, for Surfrider Foundation and you know that you need to advocate for specific policy or for specific measures and subject matter areas, you're going to want to look to the committee chairs of those committees. Each bill will be referred to committees in the House is the Speaker of the House's office, and in the Senate, it's the Senate Majority Leader's office. So that right now is yes. Nakamura and then Kochi. Yeah. And so then you have those two different types of testimony you can give. You can give in-person testimony in addition to written testimony, or you can give just written testimony if you have the time and if you have the capacity to show up in person. That's the best thing you can do. Senator Lee did not say this, but what you also don't want to do is just go in there and bother them. You don't want them to hate you. One really good strategy that you can really use is to go and make friends with all the staff. The staff are really gonna help you get through to the lawmaker. You can sign petitions. They do read these things. Literally, if Surfrider asks you to call and call your representative, as somebody who's sat there and literally took tallies of how many people called and asked for a bill to be heard, that is something that they take notice of. And so not everything is just bleak and dreary. It's there's really good people in the building who want to make it a positive impact, just as there are people who have other interests. So we're gonna now talk. I'll rip through the Capitol website. Has anybody here not been on the Capitol website?
Wow.
So even in my current role, I work at the University of Hawaii's Climate Resilience Collaborative, which is a research group led by Dr. Chip Fletcher. I work with a bunch of really smart scientists who model climate change impacts, mostly those that are driven by sea level rise. So you've probably seen the Hawaii Sea Level Rise Viewer, which shows passive flooding, annual high wave runoff, and coastal erosion. That was adopted at the due to legislation in 2017, and it's now used for a variety of state laws and county ordinances for a variety of purposes. But it contemplated that we would have 1 meter of sea level rise by 2100, which equates to 3.2 feet. That's used in real estate disclosures, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. It's used in shoreline setbacks, which is how close you can build your private structure to the ocean. It's used in the special management area, which is a ministerial permit administered by each of the counties to control development within the coastal zone. It's used in Hawaii Sea Level Rise Constraint District, which is an ordinance that says how low your lowest base flood or your lowest floorboard freeboard should be for residential structures. It's also used in the Hawaii Environmental Policy Act through the admin rules. It requires consideration of sea level rise. So any big project that's undertaken by state actors or that needs state approval for big permits will have to go through the Hawaii Environmental Policy Act. So you go onto the Capitol website, you create an account, and you can either track measures individually. So if you have one bill that you really want to keep an eye on, you can track that measure individually. What I actually do is track measures by hearing notifications for specific committees, because sometimes it's also good to get a better idea of what everything is going on. And sometimes if you're very busy or you're not as hardworking as other people, it's sometimes just nice to see the entire hearing notifications or the hearing notices so that you can see everything. And especially early on in the session before things have died, you will see if you have missed bills that you are interested in and would like to submit testimony on. Next slide, please. This is what it looks like when you start adding bills to your list. You can have several lists. You can have multiple notification redundancies, i.e. set up notifications for individual hearings as well as the committees that they're referred to. Next slide, please. And then you can go and submit testimony. You can submit testimony. There's going to be little circles that say support, oppose, attach documents. You can put the body of whatever your testimony is in the form itself, or you can submit PDFs or Word documents or however you might want to see fit. I'll quickly go over this if you want to learn how to read it. Most people know how to do this already. Like I said before, one of the only things that cannot be changed in a bill is its title. The title must be related to the subject matter of the bill. And not too long ago, there used to be a common practice called gut and replace, where you could gut and replace any bill at any point in that 3 readings in each chamber. That was overturned by the Supreme Court, but there still is, to an extent, the ability to replace subject matter in a bill, so long as it's related to the title and so long as the bill only covers one subject. Here we're looking at one of the bills that Michael Keane will be talking about later. But important things to notice. The first thing you want to look at is its referral and where it is in its current status, which is going to be at the top of this status thing. So right now we can see that this screenshot is at least a day old, but we can still see that this bill was currently scheduled to be heard by Consumer Protection and Judiciary in the House. Sorry. And so that would be the current status of that bill, and it makes it so like whatever's at the top is the most current thing. You can see if the bill has a companion. You can also see who the introducers are. The first and primary introducer is always this very first name on the left. If their names are in all caps, it means they're a first introducer. And if their names are just there and not in all caps, it means they're a first and primary. And if their names are not in all caps, it means they're a primary introducer. It's not super relevant. Literally what happens is the staff walk around the building with bills before they're introduced, if there's time, and ask other lawmakers to sign the bill. And it's usually as a result of, whomever the lawmaker is having conversations with those other lawmakers and colleagues and saying, hey, I'd love your support on this measure. In the last few years, it's been really great to have this opportunity to watch everything from the comfort of your office or your house on YouTube, and to even testify remotely if you cannot make it there in person, because that prior to COVID was not an option. Other times it's really important, if you didn't have an opportunity to watch the hearing, looking at the committee reports makes it really easy to determine what the changes that whatever the subject matter committee made to the bill. It'll literally, like, you just scroll down a couple pages and it'll say your committee has amended this measure by, and then you'll be able to go to your boss or to whomever and say, this is exactly what happened. And you'll also be able to see the individual reports. Another thing to notice, you'll notice it has SD1 here. That just means that there has been a prior Senate committee that has amended the measure. This becomes important later in the process when it comes to conference, but don't get upset don't be worried if it seems really complicated and it says, SD2, HD2, CD1. That just means House Draft 2, Senate, whatever. If you want to see the current version of any measure, you can always just click this PDF. I hate when you click it and it goes to the URL versions. I always like the PDF versions. And you can see, previous versions. And I think that's next slide, please. This is what I was talking about before. You have this opportunity it's pretty straightforward. And if you also have questions, I'm super happy to answer them in email as well on the phone. Next slide, please. Chris brought this up too. Make everything personal. If you submit the lawmakers will read your testimony, but when you're in that hearing, don't stand up and read your whole testimony. That's not a good use of your time or anybody else's. Add a little bit, but I think that the best practice you can do is go and meet with the lawmaker prior to the hearing at some point. Tell them who you are, tell them why this is important to you, give them a personal story, and then show up at the hearing and testify and say, really grateful to be here. I love my chair, I love my vice chair. I stand on my written testimony. I just want to add one thing. One of the best people to ever do it, Michael Keane, he always crushes it. And the lawmakers love that because it moves the hearings along, and they have already read your testimony, they know what it says. And giving one additional example of how this precisely affects you is the most beneficial. As Senator Lee said, if there is uncertainty among the people on the committee, they will call you back up and say, hey, we have some questions for you. And that's your opportunity to really dig in if there's uncertainty. But because everybody on the other side of the table has read your testimony, so you don't need to read the whole thing again. Next slide, please. When I like to think about coastal policy, I think about it in terms of carrots and sticks. There are things that are neither, but for the most part, you have carrots, which in this context for coastal policy are things that should entice property owners to act in anticipation of known foreseeable events. So it is foreseeable and known that sea level is rising and there's going to be escalating coastal hazards that are going to exacerbate the current situation on our beaches, which we already know are in very bad shape. And the carrots are intended to be there to be a release valve for good actors who want to get out of harm's way. So we're going to talk about a bill later that's a carrot. But you can think about broadly transferring development rights. You can think about lease back options. You can think about, in some contexts, buyouts. You can think about other incentives, like maybe giving people transient accommodation permits, something like that, for short-term recoup of investment. And then the other side of that is sticks. You have to have sticks in order for the carrots to be appealing. No property owner is going to act in good faith if there's no consequence for their actions. So sticks are the conservation laws that we have. Article 11, Section 1 of the Hawaii State Constitution says that all the state and its political subsidiaries, which includes every county agency, every state agency, every planning commission, department, etc., has the must conserve and protect all natural resources, including air, water, mineral, etc. And that includes our beaches as public natural resources, which belong to everyone. They are not the sole property of coastal property owners, and those property owners do not have the right to protect their property if it is at the expense of the public beach. Senator Lee mentioned it earlier, but that what he was referring to was Act 16 in 2020, which officially removed the ability for private coastal property owners to harden their property. It was a big one. And so other examples of sticks are the administrative rules that are administered by the Department of Land and Natural Resources, Office of Conservation and Coastal Lands, as well as the Land Division, as well as some other state agencies. But you need these sticks in place. You need this threat of enforcement and this force of consequences where people are just not going to act right, let alone are they going to want to say, hey, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to get out of harm's way and stop treating the beach like my own garbage can. So this is, I can't speak to all of this, but Stuart's going to talk and Michael's going to talk about the other stuff, but I have been pretty intensely focused on coastal policy for the last several years. And we'll talk briefly about some other bills. So the first bill, this has actually been in talks for a long time, but the idea is we often hear that a lot of the priorities that the state or the counties want to do, there's no funding for it. Coastal properties, beach houses are notoriously not cheap things, and trying to deal with private property and protect public resources can be a very expensive endeavor. And so in the context of this measure, Senator Lee had the really bright idea to say, well, all of these properties are constantly being turned over. They're constantly being sold, often to out-of-state investors who are just trying to make a buck and potentially even violating other laws in the meantime, like illegally renting them on Airbnb. And that has really a lot of important downstream impacts in our housing market, in our local communities, etc. So this bill, what it would do is deposit an existing tax, the conveyance tax, when any piece of real property, which is like land, is sold, there's a conveyance tax, which is generally deposited into a larger state fund. But instead, for properties that have been actively mapped as at risk of being impacted by any of those three coastal hazards that I talked about earlier, those properties, the conveyance tax, if this bill is passed, would be deposited into the beach, what is now called the Beach Restoration Special Fund. The name of that fund would change under the current version of the bill, and it would also include the ability to acquire property, which I personally am not super in support of, but it is something. It is an option, and for a lot of reasons, it is good for our lawmakers and decision makers to have the option to do that, which they actually could anyway. But my personal feeling is public money should not be spent to buy out and to bail out private property owners. For one thing, that creates a really bad incentive to, I can just do whatever I want. Eventually, this government's gonna buy me out.
Okay.
A moral hazard, but there are really good instances. And in fact, I wrote an op-ed saying we should buy out certain property owners. And I think there are really, that's why I was saying, like, at the same time, it does, I don't think that the majority of private property owners are gonna understand the nuance of individual situations and circumstances that were meritorious for a buyout. Yes.
Can I just add that it will also, if this does pass, it will set the stage, right? So it's building up that fund. It doesn't necessarily need to like bail out rich assholes, but we're getting that pot together, right? So sorry. I support it.
I also support the bill and will even support it in its current form. I was just noting there is a moral hazard.
So if it's acquisition at fair market,
Right.
Yeah, so let's lower the value.
Let's do it.
discount it for the hazards.
Yeah, hazard reduced value.
Are you mad at me?
What happens with property when acquired by the state?
The state under the 14th, 15th Amendment can buy a property at any time. The Beach Restoration Special Fund is administered by the Office of Conservation and Coastal Lands for specific purposes that are defined by HRS 171 and 156, which say beach restoration is defined as XYZ. For the most part, the state could do anything. Beach restoration in this context could also include just removing the structure and letting it be a natural beach. There is no affirmative obligation to do anything specific with the property under the current way the bill's written. And in fact, it's hopeful that this will, putting money in this pot would give the Office of Conservation and Coastal Lands the opportunity to really pursue proactively projects that would benefit the public and benefit our natural beaches. But that's a good question. Okay. Inside,
You can also initiate eminent domain.
right. So under the Fifth Amendment says that no public property shall be, or no private property shall be taken without just compensation. The 14th Amendment puts that on the states, gives them the same obligation. So at any time, the state could come in and do that. And that requires also a similar legislative act, and the state is also given that authority to all of the counties and to some individual agencies, and in fact, to also like to HART and stuff like that. So at any time the state could come in and do that, but it's generally a harder thing to get through. And actually this week we saw the Big Island purchase a property in front of the Onions. The Hawaiʻi County Council purchased a property there to protect public access. So that's always been a possibility. But this individual fund, which would have a clear onus and purpose, which is this beach restoration special fund, the name would change, but it would give the Office of Conservation and Coastal Lands that prerogative.
Also, the QR codes on all of these goes to our legislative page that has more information on each of these bills if you're curious.
I'll go a little faster. So this next bill that we're talking about is a stick. The last one was not really either a carrot or a stick, but this one is a stick. This is it would impose the same risk to licensed or unlicensed contractors to do illegal work, which in theory we could already penalize them. And in fact, from what I understand, the Office of Conservation and Coastal Lands has recently even settled with a contractor for work that was done unlawfully in Marconi Road. So it is not unheard of, but this would just make it much clearer for people who are doing illegal work or doing work at the direction of a postal property owner that they're not sure is legal. There are issues with penalizing one person for the same crime twice, but if you think about, say, a murder and a conspiracy, everybody can be charged for the same crime equally, and it's really meant to deter bad actors doing work that's unlawful on our beaches. We see this pretty often. Just somebody's uncle has a backhoe and they come out move some sand and you know, maybe it's fine, maybe it's fine, but it cannot just become the Wild Wild West of the beaches. Slide, please. Another thing that we notice is there have been instances where the public sees these really scary situations that are developing on our beaches. Maybe it's on a weekend, maybe it's when people are not, maybe it's when state and county people are not at their desks answering their phones, or maybe it's just something that's going to happen imminently with the big swell that's coming. There needs to be an ability for community members to give notice to the state government and to the county governments after that about these imminently threatened structures that we've seen a lot of them on the North Shore. This is another situation in which I believe that there's already a public right of action, which is Article 11, Section 9. Each person has the right to a clean and healthful environment as defined by laws related to environmental quality. And you can enforce that against any person at any time. But that's a little bit harder to go in and assert your constitutional right. But under the current version of this measure, any member of the public could petition the Department of Land and Natural Resources to make a determination whether a structure is imminently threatened. The Department of Land and Natural Resources could then request the county to require the landowner to take certain specified actions to remediate the situation, or which may include removing the structure. Next slide, please.
This the one that was deferred, but you still
Yeah,
wanted it.
yes. Oh, so this now is an example of a carrot. This bill, as she mentioned, was deferred. The last 3 bills are now, one's already been passed and 2 are gonna be heard next week. This is an example of a carrot for a bill. So this is an opportunity for, you know, good actors on the shorelines. You know, think of Kamai families who've been there for a very long time. To have the opportunity to recoup some of the equity in their property in the form of the state having dedicated funds to purchase coastal properties and either lease it back to the current property owner, or to the seller, or to anyone for that matter. But it gives those people on the shoreline who are, you know, forward looking and thoughtful and thinking, hey, I'd love to not lose my entire generational wealth on wanting to stick in here a little longer. I'll sell the property now, possibly at a discounted value considering the risk of sea level rise impacts. And the state would then have the option to lease that back to them or to someone else, or to do anything at all for that matter. And what that eliminates is later down the line is this battle between public natural resources and private property rights that we're seeing play out right now throughout the state. In this situation, the state would have the authority to just act on it. This is also one of the strategies that was identified in the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development's recent managed retreat report. And although the bill was deferred this year, there's still aspects of it that could be pushed forward, in that, you know, it might require additional research. But yeah, next slide.
It's Michael.
And I'm gonna hand it off to Michael Kane. Thanks.
Hey, I have a question for Colin. Who's the vote? Looking for this guy's vote.
Senator Lee drafted that.
Good question, Michael.
So thanks. So I was texting Anna photos to put up my slide, and you pulled it off. Thanks.
Justin. You're welcome.
Good job. Thanks. And we're gone. All right. So if you go to any of the famous beaches on Maui or Oahu, you're going to see what I consider violations of Conservation District rules. If we go to Kahala, you'll see fences, crumbling walls, cement debris, like these multi-million-dollar homes that just trash the shoreline. One empty lot is listed on Zillow for $15 million. What you don't see is the shoreline is eroded, there's a rusting fence and piles of concrete. What you will see in the advertisement is how wonderful and beautiful this is. And buyers should do their own due diligence. So a couple years ago, we worked with Surfrider, we got a disclosure bill passed where, yeah, and first time, right? It was first year? Yeah, so that requires property owners to disclose unauthorized structures, disclose any notices of violation received from our office, disclose any permits they have. Because one of the big issues we are facing, especially in the North Shore, about 15 years ago, we issued temporary emergency permits for sandbag burritos, expecting them to be there for 3 years while landowners worked on solutions. They're still there. We're in court with all of them. These houses flip. And we get new landowners coming in crying, they never knew, they never heard of erosion. They didn't know North Shore had 40-foot waves. So now it's disclosed. What we're finding though in the real estate market is that most people who've lived here a while know we have coastal issues. They're not gonna buy a $15 million house on an eroding shoreline. But now the gamblers are doing it. Like people are, coming in from Vegas, from Asia, from California, buying properties, flipping properties. So the price is kind of staying up there. And what we get at our office are panic calls. I'm on the flight to Hana or wherever they're going, Kona. I land in 5 hours. I need to close. I heard there's a violation. And so we have a bill this year to move the disclosure up to the advertising part, where these little internet ads for $15 million will disclose, oh, you have an unresolved violation from 2014. And really, these guys have more money than we do, but it puts pressure on. And what we find is there's pressure to close violations in order to make a sale, because people don't want to get involved with us, which is usually a good idea. And I think this one is a good chance to pass it, actually. We've seen support even from conservative members. I don't think anybody's voted against it. Has that been?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
and it passed, right? It passed.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's gonna cross over to the next chamber where we start our testimony all over again.
Yay. They're prepped for it because they already heard it.
They've already heard it, and we've heard the opposing testimony and have figured out ways to work around it.
Yes. Yeah.
Any questions? I'm also meeting Senator Lee tomorrow, so if you have hard questions for him, ask him.
Save our lease back program.
Is it too late?
I don't know. See if you can throw in the manager treat study into any of those bills. Amy. Public discussion.
It can be, I don't know, if you have.
No, I mean, it would just be great to save the lease back and put it into some of those other adaptation pathway bills. Echo that.
Yeah, so.
I think it's because you're right next to.
Oh, all right. Oh, anyway, I'm allowed anyway. So there is a chance to amend.
Sorry, just,
Not my.
there we go. Look your tail, yeah.
This is perfect.
Stay there. No, I forgot what I was gonna say.
There's a chance.
I want to follow up on some of the advice you've heard on giving testimony. Know what you're talking about. So have it be focused, listen to opposing testimony, and the next committee adjust for that. If you're going to make amendments, like be specific. Like don't say this bill gives too much power to DLNR. Like say on line, page 2, line 9, please change this sentence and give them the red line version. And then it's much easier for the community to say, we're just going to accept Surfrider's edits. Whereas if you give sort of a vague, you need to change this, that really means they need to work and they're, you know, WAM is hearing 90 bills next week. They don't want to do any work. So if you have a problem, give them the answer and you have better luck of them just adopting it.
Good advice. It's really good advice. Michael. All right. Next up, I think is yes. All right, it's bye time. There you go, Stewart.
All right, I'm Stuart Coleman, and this is Jess, and we're going to do speed presentation time here. So we are part of an organization called VI, which a lot of you might know. VI is the Hawaiian word for water, but it also stands for Wastewater Alternatives and Innovations. Next slide. All right, so I think you all know about this. You've been big supporters. We appreciate all the work that you're doing. We have over 80,000 cesspools that put out 52 million gallons of untreated wastewater. I have an article in the Hawaii Business Magazine this month. You can read about it. And our chair, Ted Boland, is featured in that. Woo! His first day on the job as Deputy Attorney General was in 2006, the year of the worst year of, the day before of the worst sewage spill in Hawaii's history. 48 million gallons. Can you imagine like your second day on the job and you've got to deal with that? It closed Waikiki Beach. And I mentioned that because that's the worst cesspool we've ever had. And it closed Waikiki. One person died because of it. Others were sickened. And this is what goes in every single day, just beneath the surface. So just to give you a comparison of how bad the problem is. Cesspools, we have passed a number of laws, and again, shout out to Ted, who's been our legislative leader. He's done such a great job. And so we have Act 125 to upgrade all cesspools by 2050. We're doing about 400 conversions a year, and we have to be doing about 3,400 a year to reach that deadline. So we got a little ways to go. And it's an estimated cost of like 3 to 4 billion. What we're doing is working on that to try to bring down the cost considerably and help homeowners develop new technologies and find ways to make this less expensive, easier, and faster to help protect the waters across our state. And that includes our drinking water. So there are drinking waters, there are nitrate-related illnesses, there are environmental hazards that include decreased fish populations. The biggest of all is coral reef disease. It's been documented in the last few years that the nutrients that come out from that 53 million gallons are definitely killing our coral reefs. It's like putting nitrogen and fertilizer on the reefs, and the algae grows and then suffocates the reefs. So it's a real problem. And then with climate change and sea level rise, you can imagine we're going to have a lot worse issues that these cesspools and leach fields near the coast are inundated. So you're having direct sewage going right into the water. All right, real quick, just we have 5 pillars here. It's slightly adjusted since then, but we have outreach and education, innovative technology, like I said. We have policy and education, financial resources. We have workforce development, which is really important. And this is one of the carrots that Colin was talking about. When we're talking about something that's just, let's face it, cesspools are not the sexiest topic in the world. I know that might come as a surprise to you guys. But our motto is making sanitation sexy again. And yes, that is a joke. Some people give me puzzled looks when I say that. And so you gotta always emphasize the silver lining and what is positive about this. The governor, as soon as he heard workforce development, hundreds, potentially thousands of jobs, he was like, I'm in. You got my support. This also, can stimulate the economy. So there are all kinds of benefits along with dealing with this problem. So that's just like an overall thing that we do. We have a few bills I'm going to talk about. The first one, then hand it over to Jess. We also have one of our newest employees here, Jacob, who's just started as our project manager. And we're very excited about our expanding team. And so this bill would create a cesspool conversion implementation working group. So Ted and I served on the cesspool conversion working group for 4 years, volunteering to come up with a bunch of recommendations of how we're going to deal with this multi-billion-dollar problem. We worked 4 years, published the report, and guess what they did with that?
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing. And so we were like, that's not acceptable. We worked too hard on this, and the problem's not going away as much as they want to kick it down the road. So we put a lot of pressure on, and so the Department of Health is convening this group informally right now, and then hopefully this will formalize it and give it some teeth moving forward. And we also, the bill would add 2 positions to the Department of Health. That's important. Again, kind of as was mentioned, Collins mentioned it, Michael mentioned it, like when you're working with government agencies, you can't be just opposition. Because sometimes if you just come across as the enemy, they'll treat you like the enemy and they'll keep you at arm's length. And so we're constantly saying, what can we do for you to help you do your job better? And what do you need? And so they need staff. And so we're like, we'll champion that. We'll push for that. And so we've, really developed a kind of collegial working relationship with them. We still differ about a lot of things, but they know at least we're working toward the same long-term goals. And that's really important. On the human level, you have to connect with them personally, and that they see you as not just one of these environmentalists who's always complaining about something, but a real person, and that you see them as real people. Ask about their kids. Like it means a lot to them to make that connection. So I'll pass it on to Jess for this bill.
So one of the things that I talked to Emma's marine policy class about was that sewage is not sexy. Surfing is sexy, but we cannot surf in sewage. So I know I got you guys really fired up about that, and I really appreciate your guys' help with our priority bills. But one of the things that we're doing with HB 379 is we're looking to the source, and we're looking to denitrification. And that is one of the main pollutants that is causing damage to our reef and also to our health. And that's another huge aspect of the work that we do with VI. And I want to talk to you guys about that as well. Next slide, a little bit. The biggest barrier to cesspool conversion is affordability. So if we're going to meet that mandate, homeowners are going to need help. And this is a bill that is going to provide help administered by the Hawaii Green Infrastructure Authority. So this is a really great way that we can get to that mandate and reach it in order to protect our reefs and also to protect ourselves when we're in Hawaii's water. I think that I want to talk to you guys a little bit about our civic program, but I don't want to keep you guys here too much longer. And I want to thank you guys for your involvement thus far and for coming and hearing about our bills. But yeah, I think cesspool conversion is one of those issues when we're talking about it. I'm seeing the looks on some of your faces, like, what the heck? And I felt the exact same way when I found out about what felt to me like a bit of a hidden story of Hawaii. So that's why it's really exciting that we have these bills as far as we have them. And I know Hannah's going to talk a little bit more about how we can get them over that finish line and get them passed. So I think we're going to pass it on, talk about.
I think you have one more.
We have one more. This is another one of our bills that is going to help to meet that affordability issue, which I think being the biggest barrier, these are some of our most important tools that we have in order to combat this issue. And this is a tax credit up to $10,000 for taxable years. So these are some really exciting ideas. And I think a part of this conversation is having a conversation. So I'd love if you guys would come up to us after and talk to us and give us your ideas and tell us stories. Have you ever gotten in the water and gotten sick? And what kind of ideas and innovations can you think about that we could have a conversation on to tackle this issue together? And yeah, I think that's enough from Vi. Come find us, talk to us after. And yeah, thank you guys so much for your interest and for coming. I love to talk.
More bill for you. Sorry.
Please do, yeah.
House Bill 2618, related to the green fees.
Yes.
Part of that would establish an accessible conversion for all of it.
Yeah.
So are you following that?
We are. We had to narrow down a few of our priorities.
Yeah.
Under-
Yeah, thank you. Was that for the transparency? I mean, for the list of.
Bunch of them.
Yeah, yeah. We are working, Chris is the person to talk about that. We are working to advance a project with cesspools regarding the green fee. So if you are looking for bills that, support a bunch of different causes, that, the overriding picture, the big picture is support these green fee bills. Hawaii is one of the first states to do this. It is big. And I know you've just gotten bombarded by tons of information tonight, but some of the things that Chris and Colin and Michael were talking about, they're huge. They're not only on the national radar, they're on the international radar. And so the green fees are part of that. Like, we've dedicated more than $100 million each year. And that took years of work that Krista and a whole coalition of us did to really create. And so it's an exciting time. Don't ever forget that you have a lot of power on these things.
All right, before I talk about hotel toiletry, yeah, thank you, Vi. Thank you, Beth. General, I want you to go first. Okay. Hey everyone, this is Amy. So she is amazing, and she works with Michael at OCCL and wants to talk about 2 other bills that are relevant.
Yeah, just really quick. I was asking Hannah why these 2 other ones weren't on here, and it's just hard to track everything or to make everything important. But 2 bills to keep your eye on are Senate Bill 2401 and Senate Bill 237, which 2401 started out as a bill that was not so good, but has now been amended, thank you, Michael, to a bill that has resurrected the idea of adaptation pathways planning, which was a phrase to kind of replace the idea of managed retreat in the legislative speak, because we know that adaptation pathways are probably the right way to go. There are places where we need to retreat right now. There are places where we need to have managed retreat maybe 20, 30, 50 years from now. So those are 2 to keep your eye on. Senate Bill 237 is one that was introduced last year. It has that really low bill number because it was carried over from the previous session. It passed this joint committee in AEN and Water and Land in the Senate, and I think it's on its way to WHAM. Is that right, Colin? WHAM next? Yeah. And then also 2401, I think that one might have passed everything on the Senate side now.
Did it cross over?
It'll be going to like 3rd reading on the floor.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Anyway, just bring those to everyone's attention. Also, trying to keep alive the ideas of thinking about holistic planning for long-term adaptation to sea level rise and moving away from our shorelines and adapting in all senses with our wastewater management, but also removing structures from imminently threatened places in the shoreline are 2 other ones to keep your eyes on.
Yay, thank you, Amy. Oh, so yesterday we had our North Shore Coast Resilience Working Group meeting, which Amy is a part of, and I was in her group. And pretty much every question that we had, or we were supposed to like develop solutions, and it kind of evolved to every solution was just call Amy. So if you have a problem,
I told you I wasn't coming
this
tonight.
woman right here. All right. Okay, so 2 more bills and then we're almost done, guys. So thank you so much for bearing with us. So this bill, you might remember it from last year. Last year was HB 348. We got it all the way and then it just didn't get scheduled. So it was resurrected. So this is HB 1948, the mini plastic, oopsies. Mini plastic toiletries prohibition and lodging establishments. So this would prohibit lodging establishments from providing those tiny little things pictured over here in sleeping room accommodations and etc. So just like to frame the issue, as of December, the state of Hawaii received over 9.5 million visitors in 2025. That's over 6 times the state's populations. Where are they staying? Lodging establishments. So Hawaii has over 280 hotels, along with hundreds of bed and breakfasts, tens of thousands of vacation rentals. So this equates to millions of plastic bottles entering our waste stream. So this is a very simple bill. We're just saying, hey, you guys can't be putting those out anymore. And actually, it would save hotels money. So it's kind of silly that they're not doing this. Ironically, not ironically, but coincidentally, this is actually an intersection with our program. So ocean-friendly hotels, one of the mandatory criteria is that they can't have any of this nonsense. So it passed EEP and Tourism Committee. It still needs to be heard in finance. Next, please. Okay, last one. It actually just got scheduled today, so that's exciting. So this is SB 2975. So this is our Marine Life Conservation District Visitor Management. So it would authorize DLNR to temporarily close portions of, now it's Oahu, it used to be statewide. That's still okay, we're gonna support it. Portions of Oahu's marine life conservation districts and to regulate commercial activity when necessary. So what happens in these high-use marine life conservation districts is we have unmanaged visitor pressure, sorry about that, that results in coral breakage, coral breakage, trampling, and it damages wildlife, disturbances leading to chronic ecological stress. So it's an issue, right? Also, you know, we have a prohibition on like on sunscreens that are not reef safe, but still people don't always listen to that. So we have all these chemicals that are going in. Anyways, we want to reduce that pressure. So currently DLNR actually lacks clear statutory authority to implement these targeted closures. So, you know, evidence shows that it works at Hanama Bay and also research at Pupukea Marine Life Conservation District. They really demonstrate that there's measurable reef recovery when visitation is managed. So really trying to advocate for that. And then hopefully we can expand it statewide. Next, please. All right, so if everyone could take out their phone and take a photo of this. This is our take action. So you've listened to us drone on for almost 2 hours. And this is how you can meaningfully engage now. So there's a number of bills that need to be scheduled in their final committee in order to make it to crossover. So I would recommend sending an email and calling them, asking for these bills to be scheduled. Also, we have some bills that are scheduled for next week that we want you to submit testimony on. So on March 4th, it happens that there's a Senate Judiciary and Senate Consumer Protection, yes, committee that's hearing 3 of our bills. So yes, please take a photo. Also, again, this is a QR code to our legislative page. VI had also their QR code to their legislative page. I think the only overlapping bill that I have on mine is HB 1730. So if you want more information, maybe we can go back to one of VI's bills so that you can see the QR code there. Yes, so now you all have the QR code to their legislative page. Did we get it? Okay, cool. Go back. We're so close. I think we have 2 more slides. Yes, find your mission. I think that we're all here because we care about similar things, protecting our ocean waves and beaches. So there's multiple organizations that you can engage with here. Please pay attention to action alerts. We do this generally through emails and social media. So again, you know, I talked about strategically escalating, right? So I'm not, or we're not, you know, asking you on every single committee hearing. So when it does go out, that means something. So please respond to the call to action. Next. Okay, join the movement. Yes, it's all about building the movement. So this is a QR code to Surfrider Oʻahu events. Staying informed if you want to join our newsletter, and then volunteer. So also put our Instagram handles up there because this was kind of a joint event. All of these priorities are for the entire Hawaii region of Surfrider. So Hawaii and Maui Instagrams are up there, and also for VI. So that's it. We made it. Let's take a group photo. Well done, everyone. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you all coming. And if you have any questions, come find us and we'll be here for a little bit. So thank you so much. Thank you. Yay. Yeah, maybe we go to the first one. Oh, how do we like save the recording? Because I messed this up in the thing. Here?